Have it
Yes.
full screen?
Yes. Yes. Go to the second slide to see.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so these are the co-developers of the Sutra model, Professor Manindra Agarwal and of IIT Kanpur, and Lieutenant General Madhuri Kanitkar, who is the Deputy Chief of the Integrated Defense Staff. Uh, so we three work together on this model. So please go to the next slide. So this is an outline of the lecture. So you can go to the next slide. So this is a background of the committee's work. So in late May of 2020, the Department of Science and Technology appointed a 10-person committee. It was called the COVID-19 National Supermodel Committee, and I was the chairman of that committee. We finished our work and submitted a report to DST in the middle of October. And after the middle of November, the committee really did not meet. And the bulk of this work on the first model was done by three of us, Professor Agarwal, General Kanitkar, and me. So we published this so-called supermodel as SAIR2, and it appeared in the Indian Journal of Medical Research, and this paper appeared in January of 2021. However, this model had a lot of limitations. So we continue to work, not necessarily under the umbrella of the supermodel committee, but just on our own. And we came out with this model, which we're now calling as Sutra. We deposited the paper in the archive uh, preprint repository in January 2021. And just a few days ago, we updated it again. But this preprint does not actually have the third wave prediction. It has only the predictions for the second wave of India and also predictions for various countries. Now we are working on the next version of the Sutra model, which is going to be good for third wave predictions. And what we're incorporating are the erosion of immunity and the impact of vaccination. And I'll be presenting it to you right near the end of this lecture. Okay, so just go to the next slide. It just says early model. So now please go to the next slide. So this is a description of the Spanish flu. If you can see, the Spanish flu started in the early part of 1918 while the First World War was still going on. And there was a little bump, as you can see, and then it plateaued out. There were hardly any deaths. So people thought the pandemic was over. But then in the early part of 1919, there was the massive outbreak. And this is where most of the deaths occurred in the middle wave. And then towards the end of 1919, it ebbed. So people thought it was over. But then in late 1919, early 1920, it came back a second time. So the end result is that if you see, the third peak was lower than the second peak, but higher than the first. And just to put these numbers in perspective, in the middle peak, around 14 to 15,000 people were dying every week, or 2-3,000 people were dying every day. And the world population at that time was about a quarter of what it is, about a third of what it is today. So this is like about 6 to 7,000 people dying every single day. It was a massive loss of life, and that was the previous one before the current COVID pandemic. And in our preprint, we have highlighted other things like the swine flu and SARS. They were not nearly so deadly. So the next slide, please. So I'm just going to very quickly show you a few mathematical models. One is called SIR, and the other one is called SIRS. I'm not going to actually dwell on the equation. and just give you the general philosophy. So this SIR model was proposed by two people, Kermack and McKendrick, in 1927, and it was meant to model the spread of the bubonic plague in Pune, and they published this model in 1927. And they divided the population into three groups. S was for susceptible, I for infected, R is for removed. And then each of these numbers is expressed as a fraction of the population. So it lies between 0 and 1. And the premise of the Kermack and McKendrick model is that the rate of spread is proportional to the number of contacts between the susceptible and the infected people. And they also made the other assumption that people who recover are not liable for reinfection. Now, there is a variation of this, which is called the SIRS model, which was not proposed by these people. It's proposed later, but the extra S at the end is if some people, after they recover, they lose their immunity over time and get back to being susceptible. So, if the disease under study is something like a smallpox or measles, where if you get it once, you'll not get it a second time, then you use SIR model. But if you lose immunity over time, then you, like flu, for example, then you use the SIRS model. So let's go to the next slide. Here's a quick picture of this SIR model. So everyone starts in the box S, except for a very small number of people in the box I. They are the seed of the pandemic. So when S people meet the I people at some rate of beta, which is called the contact rate, they become infected. And then the I people who are infected, they recover at a certain rate called gamma. Extremely simple model, but surprisingly effective. And if you're interested, the differential equations are at the bottom of the page. The next slide, please. So I have just shown the same equations again, and beta is called the contact rate and gamma is called the recovery rate. And just to remind you once again, S, I, and R are numbers between 0 and 1, showing what fraction of the population belongs to each of these groups. So what does beta mean? It means when somebody in I meets someone in S, what is the likelihood that the infection would resolve? And what about gamma? If you look at the last equation, R dot is equal to gamma I, you can see very quickly that 1 divided by gamma is the average time that an infected person takes to recover or die, as the case might be. Now, if you look at the equation, you can see that S dot plus I dot plus R dot equals 0. So that means the sum remains constant, and the constant value is 1. So even though there are 3 equations, only 2 equations are independent. The third equation can be thrown away. Most people usually keep the S and I equation and don't study the R equation, because once you compute S and I from the last equation on the bottom, R is just 1 minus S plus I. Okay. So now please go to the next slide. So what I'm trying to explain in this slide is this phrase that you have heard very often, which is called herd immunity. So what is herd immunity? So a key parameter in this SIR model is something called R0, the basic reproduction ratio. So R0 is the average number of persons that an infected person in I can infect before he himself recovers. And R0 is actually beta divided by gamma. So if R0 is less than 1, the pandemic doesn't take off. If R0 is greater than 1, as this little formula shows, the number of infected people peaks when I plus R is equal to R0 minus 1 divided by R0. So I'm just going to spend 1 minute on this formula. Suppose, for example, that the basic reproduction ratio is 4. So that means the average person is infecting 4 others before he recovers. So R0 minus 1 is 3. So R0 minus 1 divided by R0 is 3 over 4, so 75%. What is this telling us? This tells you that the pandemic will peak when the number of people who are currently infected plus the number of people in R who are the people who are previously infected, that total is 75% of the population. At that point, that is the tipping point at which the number of new infections begins to decrease. Okay. So you can see from this formula that the higher R0, the higher H is. H is a number between 0 and 1. So for instance, if R0 is only 2, let us say, then H is going to be 1 over 2 or half. So the pandemic dies down that much more quickly. Okay. Next slide, please. So the next slide is SIRS model, and the only thing that is different in this equation, if you see, and I have a picture on the next slide, but it just tells you that some people in R actually re-enter back into the group S, and the rate is called theta. So go to the next slide, please. So you can see this extra arrow at the top there. It shows from R, some people going back to S. So remember what I told you, that if the pandemic is a disease that gives you lifelong immunity, you don't need SIRS, you only need SIR. But if it is something like the flu or something like that, where you retain immunity for only a short period of time, then you have to allow this extra arrow from R back into S, the top arrow in this picture. And the COVID-19, from all indications, it does seem to be in this category, namely, whatever immunity you have does not last forever, at least for the bulk of the population. So now please go to the next slide, and this is the only important conclusion that I want you to look at. In the SIR model, in the steady state, what happens is that there are no more infected people. Everybody is either susceptible or recovered. And the higher the ratio, the higher the basic reproduction ratio, more people will be in R and fewer people will be in susceptible. But if you look at the second bullet in the SIRS model, what happens is that I of t never goes to 0, and this is what is called an endemic disease. So an endemic disease means that the pandemic, okay, let me do it well. Okay, it just goes up and down, up and down. It never goes to 0. Very cyclical behavior, which is exactly what we are seeing in the case of the coronavirus. Okay, next please. Next slide. So this is just a Sutra model. So let's just go to the next slide. This is a slide which says what is the unique feature of the COVID-19? Well, it's what is called asymptomatic patient. So if you look at a traditional pandemic, like the standard flu, you are sitting in a park or you're getting on a city bus or something like that, and the person next to you starts coughing, then what will you do? You will move away and go to someplace else. Or the person who's coughing may cover his mouth to prevent spreading the disease. But in the case of corona, this doesn't happen. What happens is that the overwhelming majority of people are what are called asymptomatic. They themselves do not know that they have the disease because they do not manifest any symptom. And in spite of that, they are infecting others. Okay. I will just plug in my laptop, my cell phone, 1 second. Just charging it so we don't have any problem. So what happens is that a person is asymptomatic and they infect others, and interestingly, the rate at which they infect others is pretty much the same as with infected people. So that means somebody who's coughing and throwing up a lot is not infecting others any more than somebody who is very silently infecting others. So if you cannot estimate how many people are asymptomatic in society, you'll never be able to get an accurate estimate of how the pandemic is going to progress. So that's the unique feature here. Okay, next slide, please. So I'm going to very quickly tell you something about this SAIR model. It's a very complicated model, but I'm just going to show it to you for historical interest only. And if you don't follow it, please do not bother because, as I said, it's for historical interest only. So what people did was to say, all right, we'll introduce two boxes. One is called A for asymptomatic and I for infected. And the second bullet is the key one. It says, if a susceptible person meets either an A person, that is asymptomatic, or meets an I person, they can get infected at this rate beta. And whenever they get infected, first they become asymptomatic, and some small fraction of people eventually become fully infected. And then from the A box, some of them move directly to the recovery box. So that means an asymptomatic patient can infect others and recover without even being aware that they are infected. And people in the infected box I move to R. So it looks like a lot of words. So here is a picture on the next slide. And it shows the flow. So everyone starts in the S group, except for a few people who may be either asymptomatically or symptomatically infected. So some people, very small number, are either in A or I. And whenever they come in contact with S, an infection takes place, and those people move into the box I. And then if you see the arrow at the top, a lot of people from the asymptomatic group directly move to the recovery box. And then people from the I infected box also move to the recovery. So this is the mathematics, but at the bottom is the most important thing, which is the assumption. The assumption of this model is everybody who is infected can be measured because they show some symptoms, so they go see their doctor. And everybody in A escapes observation because they are not showing any symptoms, nobody bothers with them. As it turns out, next slide, please. As it turns out, this is not true of corona. It took us a while to understand this. And why is this not true of corona? Well, look at the first bullet. Yes, almost everybody who shows symptoms is detected because they go to the doctor. But then what happens is they're isolated. They're put in some sort of a quarantine. Therefore, they do not have a chance to infect anybody else. I mean, some leakage takes place, but by and large, most people don't then interact, go around infecting others. So almost all fresh infections take place due to contact between asymptomatic patients and the susceptible people. That is point number one. That is the first bullet. What about the second bullet? Remember, in the previous slide, I said the premise was that every asymptomatic person escapes detection, but that's not true. What have we done in India? Whenever somebody tests positive, we go and do contact tracing of everybody else, their family members, neighbors, all this kind of thing. And in the process, typically in India, at least in the early part of the pandemic, for every one person who tested positive, we were testing 20-25 others. So as a result of this testing, some fraction of asymptomatic people also get detected. So the two fundamental differences, those who are showing visible symptoms usually do not have the opportunity to infect others because they're kept in some quarantine. And those who are asymptomatic, some small fraction of them do get detected. So in Sutra model, what we did was, we said the correct division, that is the third bullet, the correct division is not between A and I, but between T, those who test positive, and U, who are the undetected ones. And within T, those who test positive, this is something people don't understand. At least I think they don't understand. Suppose you get an RT-PCR test and it is positive. People get very agitated. But the fact of the matter is, both in the first wave and the second wave, somewhere between 80 to 85% of the people who tested positive were asymptomatic. Okay? Only around 15% required any form of hospitalization or follow-up care. So those people, almost all of them recover. Only all deaths come from the small fraction of T that are symptomatic. And what about the undetected people? Well, the undetected people, they all recover because they don't have the symptoms, so they're never in any danger. The only danger they pose is to other people. So for a period of about 8 to 10 days, they go around infecting others. But after that, they are not going to be in any danger, nor are they any danger to other people. So only that very small window of 8 to 10 days that they are going to infect other people. So that's the dynamics of the COVID-19. So let's go to this Sutra model, which is the next slide. So what does the acronym Sutra stand for? You can see in the caption of the figure. S stands for susceptible, U stands for undetected, T stands for tested positive, R stands for removed, and A stands for analysis. So that's how we came up with this acronym. So there is a picture, what we call the compartmental diagram. I will not go through it in a very great detail, but it just captures what I was telling you on the previous slide. And if you are interested, the differential equations of the Sutra model are also at the bottom of the slide. And the parameters beta and gamma have the same meaning as I had earlier. Beta is the contact rate. What is the likelihood that when an asymptomatic or tested person meets a susceptible person, what's the likelihood of an infection? And gamma is the recovery rate. But now you see there is a new parameter called epsilon. If you can look in the equation and in the picture. So what is epsilon? So this is called the undetection rate. This is one of our major contributions. Remember, I told you that the key to analyzing the COVID pandemic is figuring out how many undetected patients there are. And that ratio is this number, 1/epsilon. There's a fourth number, which is implicit, it's called reach. If this had been a little more mathematical talk, I would be actually explaining what the reach is. But what it is just as the name implies, it tells you what fraction of the people are potentially vulnerable to being infected. Okay? So now please go to the next slide. And this kind of gives justification for this reach. And the slide, the title of the slide is going from raw cases to fractions. So what do I mean by this? Remember all these things, H, U, T, R, they're all numbers between 0 and 1. But you don't get zeros and 1. You get case counts, which are integers. So you see in Bangalore 2000 cases, something like that. Okay. So what is I then? It's the 2000 cases divided by the population. But what's the population? So it may be naive to say, well, it's the total population of the city or the state or the country, but that's not true. This is, please look at the fourth bullet. This is where the concept of reach comes in. It's the fraction of the population that is actually exposed to the disease. It initially starts at 0 and increases towards 1. And this parameter 1/epsilon is called the undetection rate. Both these concepts are new, and no other model has them. The SAIR model had epsilon, but it did not have reach, and that it has completely improved the accuracy. So now let's go to the next slide. It's called fitting parameters from actual data. Now the interesting point here, if you read a bunch of papers in the pandemic literature, now let me go back off a little bit since I'm addressing an IEEE audience. If you're an engineer, it would seem to be almost obvious that once you write down a bunch of equations, you determine the parameters by fitting the data, right? I don't think anyone has to tell you that you have to choose the parameters so as to reproduce the data. But there are so many people in the pandemic world who just pick some numbers completely at random. So it's almost an embarrassment that I have to actually mention that your parameters have to be determined from the data and not just chosen by you in some fashion. So that's what I mean by the first bullet. Almost all existing models ignore this aspect. And we gave the second bullet, robust methods for the parameter estimation. And that's the key to our approach. And the third bullet says there is a linear relationship between some measured quantities. I won't tell you what they are. You can easily find out from the paper. But this linear relationship, which we have proven mathematically, that is the key to the Sutra model. After an initial mismatch period, this linear relationship holds, and when the new data fails to satisfy the linear relationship, we have to recalibrate the parameters, and this is called a phase change. So now you look at the next slide, please. In the next 3 slides, I'm going to show you 3 different linear relationships, one for Italy, one for India, and one for USA. My reason for doing that is to demonstrate that this linear relationship holds across countries, that means across geography, and also across time. Okay, so this red dots, so the straight line always passes through the origin. These red dots are the initial drift period, as we call them. And then the blue dots, you see, they're very nicely following on a straight line. So this is one of the phases of the Italy pandemic. And what I told you on the previous slide, once the blue dots don't follow the straight line anymore, that's when you have to recalibrate the model. So next slide, please. This slide is for India. And in India, the red dots are at the beginning, and then the blue dots are coming afterwards. And once again, you see the nice straight line relationship. And the third slide, illustration of linear relationships 3, is for the US. Now here I want you to notice something interesting. In both Italy and India, you saw that the red dots were more or less lining up with the blue dots. That's a little bit off. But in the US, that's not true at all. I mean, the red dots are nowhere near the straight line defined by the blue dot. So that means the adjustment period in the US is fairly prolonged. But then eventually those also fall on a straight line. And this is phase 8 of the US pandemic. Okay. So the key to our model, just let me explain, is this mathematical proof that the horizontal axis, which you can see is the integral of t times t plus rt, and the vertical axis, which is a long formula which you can see, that they must satisfy a linear relation. And when they fail to satisfy, that means there is a new phase has started. Okay. So what is this phase business that I'm going on mentioning? See, the parameters of a pandemic, especially over several months period, do not remain constant. Okay. For example, if you look at the second bullet, what about the contact rate? Initially, people are very careful to follow COVID protocols. Then after a while, they start getting careless. And when they start getting careless, the contact rate goes up. What I mean by contact rate, remember, it's not the physical contact, okay? It's the likelihood that when 2 people meet, an infection takes place. So, if 2 people meet, one of them is wearing a mask and one is not, then beta is higher than if 2 people meet and both of them are wearing. Or if 2 people are standing right next to each other, it's the following social distancing. You understand? So beta will change depending on how closely people follow the COVID protocol. The other thing which happened, especially in our second wave, if there is a new mutant which is much more infectious, then beta will increase very rapidly. But as the third bullet says, beta will also decrease rapidly. For example, if a lockdown is imposed, that means people are staying at home, the contacts are a lot less, so beta will decrease. So we have to be able to figure this out from the data itself. Now the last bullet is talking about the reach. It starts at 0 because usually a pandemic starts in one part of the country. And then as it spreads, the row increases. But you see, even within a city, you can have protected bubbles like gated communities, which are initially immune to the pandemic because the gated community residents may say, no, you can't allow servants to come in and all that, but eventually they have to relax and then the pandemic gets. So this is the role of the reach. Okay. So now, let me just go to the next slide. Just 1 second, I kind of lost my place here. So I'm going to get back to the synchronism. Okay, now let me come to the next slide, which is actual prediction. Next slide, please. So the first one says predictions for other countries. And we have actually predicted for about 20 different countries. In our preprint, we showed for about 6 or 7 countries. Today, for want of time, I'm going to show you only 2 countries, USA and UK. So let's go to the next slide, which is summary of Sutra prediction. The reason why I chose USA and UK for today's presentation, and can you go back to the previous slide, which is summary of Sutra prediction? Yeah. The reason why I chose USA and UK is that they have already had multiple waves, but the spacing has been just a few months, unlike in India, where the peaks were about 8 months apart. And we could not initially explain these multiple waves until we introduced this concept of reach. And once we introduced reach, we showed that the peaks were caused by increases in reach. So the next 2 slides show first is US, second is UK, and we'll come back to UK again later when I talk about the Indian third wave. Okay, here are the predictions for USA. And the blue is the actual, and the gold color is the model computed. Okay. So essentially, you can see that USA has had 3 waves. And the third wave has a bit of zigzag, but I ignore that. You can think of it as just one wave. So a little small wave, followed by a bigger wave, then followed by a still bigger wave, and then a fourth little bump. Okay. Now, there is something very important you should know about the US. The Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, as of May 1st, you see this graph goes up beyond May 1st. As of May 1st, the US has decided to stop counting mild to medium infection. So this big peak that you saw approximately around the end of 2020, that included mild and medium cases as well as hospitalization. Whereas what you're seeing after May 1st is only hospitalization. So obviously that number is much smaller, but it is not a fair comparison. So for example, if you see the US, they are reporting 10 or 11,000 cases per day, but that 10 or 11,000 people getting hospitalized every day. It's a lot. Okay. The reason why I'm making this point is it's very common for Indians to look at our data and US data and say, oh, USA is doing much better. No, it's not. Because as of May 1st, they have changed their accounting system. All right. So next slide, please. Now, this is our predictions for UK. And you see what's happening in the UK is very interesting. The blue curve is roughly where we are now at the end of June. And we are projecting a peak in the middle of July. And what does this tell us about India? I'll tell you when we come to that. So next, please. So now let me tell you the projections for India. I'm going to spend 2 slides telling you about first peak and second peak for India, and then finally the third wave, pardon me. So this is what we did in the first wave. We predicted the peak around the middle of September, and that is exactly what happened. Our data collection was not that great, so the blue curve is wavy all over the place, and the golden colored curve is what we predicted, and you can see it pretty much matched till about the start of February, in the middle of February. So what happened in the middle of February? So next slide, please. So this is 9 phases for the Indian pandemic. Okay. So you can see the parameters. So the first phase started on 2nd March, second phase on 20th March, etc., etc. What I would like you to notice is the column marked beta. Beta is the contact rate. And if you see right at the bottom of the slide, it says R0, that is the reproduction ratio, is 10 times beta. So that means when beta is 0.32, for example, which is in the first row, each person was infecting 3.2 other people before he got better. And if you see that column marked beta, okay, initially beta was at 0.32, then thanks to various lockdowns, it kept going down, down, down to 0.16. And then till about the middle of August, it stayed at 0.16, 0.15, because by then some form of herd immunity had kicked in. Then in November, people started becoming very careless. So beta started going up again. In January, it was 0.23. Now, what happened in the 10th of February? Why has it suddenly jumped from 0.23 to 0.38? See, everybody thinks that India's second wave started in April. It didn't. It actually started in the first quarter of February. That's where the start of it was. So, and then thanks to various lockdown measures, it went down again to 0.28. And I would also like you to look at the column out 1 over epsilon. That has been very steady at 28. That means the total number of undetected plus tested people is 28 times the number who are tested positive. Or to put it another way, for every person who's tested positive, there are 27 others who are undetected. And our ability to predict this and also to have it validated by serological surveys, that's one of the strengths and the validations of our model. Okay, others haven't done this. And the last column is the reach, which is expressed as a percentage. And you see what has happened between row 8 and row 9. The reach was only around 40% of the country, and it suddenly jumped to 72%. So the infection ratio went up. You can see it went from 0.23 to 0.38, that is row 8. And the reach also went up from 41% to 72%. So more faster spreading disease, more people vulnerable to the disease. So naturally, that's why we had the second wave. So that is what I said here. The massive increase in the basic reproduction ratio. Yeah, the next slide, please. What caused the second wave? Massive increase in the reproduction ratio from 2.3 to 3.8. This is the variant that started in the Amravati district of Maharashtra, and people disregarding COVID guidelines, and the reach went way up. Now, lockdowns brought the basic reproduction ratio down to 2.8, but lockdowns are not a sustainable long-term solution. So we did two things. Various state governments are asking us, can we ease the lockdowns now? And if so, what will be the impact? And we showed them that it won't have that much impact. And also, in the second wave, different states had different lockdown models. So we could compare the effect. And we showed that the gentle kind of lockdown with normal life continuing but large gatherings banned is much more effective in reducing the basic reproduction ratio than the total lockdown that some states have been imposing. In some states, lockdowns have been going on for more than 2 months. And this is simply not sustainable. And in our opinion, it's not even very effective. Okay, next slide, please. So these are our predictions for the second wave. And the blue is the actual. We didn't update this plot because the blue is stopping at the start of June. But if you see at the bottom, there is a website called sutra-india.in. That's a real-time update of our prediction. And I just used this slide to show that this faint golden colored curve was calibrated on the 29th of April, and the more dark gold colored was computed on the 15th of May, and you see it's giving a very, very good fit. And you see the blue is diverging a little bit from even the solid gold curve around the start of May. And the reason is two states in India, Maharashtra and Kerala, are basically stuck. They're flat. Everybody else is coming. Like, for example, Uttar Pradesh went from a peak of around 30,000 cases to a few hundred. Maharashtra went down from a peak of 60,000 to around 10,000. So the percentage reduction in Maharashtra has not been high at all. And the same is true of Kerala. So yesterday, for example, we had 46,000 new cases, out of which half are from Maharashtra and Kerala. So that's why this divergence is taking place. We need to understand why. Okay, now part that everybody is interested in, forecasting the third wave. Okay, so let me go back to the premises. So our current model does not incorporate the erosion of acquired immunity. So the idea is, once you recover from the corona, you are not going to be vulnerable for infection for some period of time. But what is that period of time? And the second, of course, is the impact of vaccination. The next slide is a picture which I'm going to go through really fast. It is a mathematical model. It's incorporating immunity erosion. It's just a picture how you can change the compartmental model. Can you just advance the slide, please? It just shows you how to put erosion of immunity. That is this parameter called delta. And then the next slide, which is most important and relevant to us, this is called possible immunity erosion rate. So what various studies are showing is that most people who lose immunity do so in the first 3 months. And the number of people who lose immunity is anywhere between 20% to 40% of the people. After 3 months, it doesn't look like there's a whole lot of erosion of immunity against reinfection. So go to the next slide, please, which is called impact of vaccination. So what does vaccination do? If you take 100 people and you vaccinate 70% of them, the 30% who are not vaccinated are still fully susceptible. The 70% who are vaccinated, it doesn't mean they're all protected. There is the efficacy ratio of the vaccine. Let's say the efficacy ratio is 60%. Then you multiply 0.7 into 0.6 and you say 42% of the people now have protection. So that's the way it works. And secondly, when we have a 2-dose vaccine, that is what the second bullet says, the first dose reduces the risk of infection by around 25 to 30%, and 2 doses reduce it by 50 to 60%. Now people may say, wait a minute, then what is the point of getting vaccinated if I still have a 30 or 40% of getting sick again? Well, the point is the second sub-bullet, risk of serious infection, use including hospitalization and death is virtually zero. That means that the vaccination protects you against serious reinfection, not against mild reinfection. People need to understand. And the other point is what happens if you vaccinate a person who's still recovering and already has antibodies, and in effect the vaccine gets wasted. So the good news, which I said in the last bullet, is that you can actually modify the Sutra model to incorporate all of these. Now let's go back to UK. Next slide. UK is ahead of us in the pandemic, so we can use that to calibrate our own prediction. As of the 1st of July, UK population of 68 million had 77 million doses. A whole lot of people have got double doses, right? Now, in their devastating third wave, their peak was 7-day moving average of 60,000 cases, huge number. And the daily deaths was 1,240 deaths. Now, in the so-called fourth wave, which you will see in the next slide, the 7-day moving average is at 21%. So everybody is getting alarmed, and I apologize for this typographical error. It is not 35%. It is not 40%. It is 35% of the earlier. But interestingly, look at this. Even though the number of new cases is 35% of the earlier peak, the deaths are only 14. Yesterday they had 14 deaths. That's all for 26,000 new cases. Okay. So what is the reason for that? It's the bottom line. The conclusion is many vaccinated people are getting reinfected, but deaths are near zero. I can't help emphasize this point enough because in the previous slide I said that vaccination reduces your risk of reinfection by around 50 to 60%. You still have a risk of getting infected, but it is almost guaranteed to be mild. Okay, the risk of serious infection or death is close to zero. Okay, so now this is what I said here. Next slide, please. You revisit it. So if you look at the peak there, which we are projecting around the middle of July, but this may change because their numbers are very unstable. The number of cases is high, but the number of deaths is very low. Okay, so now what about India? This is what everybody is waiting for. So the second wave had a peak load of around 4 lakhs. That happened in the first week of May. And the blue curve is shown here in great detail for the 1st of July, pardon me, and our predictions are holding up. Now, going forward in the future, we decided to take three possible scenarios. One we called optimistic scenario, one we called intermediate scenario, and there's hardly any difference between them. And the third one is called the pessimistic scenario. You can see the pessimistic scenario is the one that has the biggest bump. So there we will see a third wave peak of somewhere between around 1.5 lakhs. Okay. But I want to once again remind you what I said about UK. Just because we have, let's say, so 1.5 lakhs versus 4 lakhs in the second wave, again, it's around 40% of the second wave peak. But that does not mean that the number of hospitalizations, the number of deaths, everything is going to be 40% of what it was in the second wave. Because I gave the UK as an example to show number of infections is high, but the number of severe infections is very low. And this is what we expect will happen in the Indian third wave as well. So now I come to my last slide where I talk about the caveats. There are three scenarios which are based on the current variant called the Delta virus, and there's something called Delta Plus. As usual, the media is trying to do hype on this Delta Plus, but Delta Plus is not much different from Delta, so ignore that. If by chance we get a still more virulent virus, we'd have to revisit the projection, but we're on top of it and we'll be able to revisit these predictions if necessary. The third bullet is the one that frankly worries me, I have to tell you honest. Our predictions are based on 5.7 million daily doses in July, 7.3 in August, and 8 million thereafter daily. And we're nowhere near that. Let's be very blunt. In the month of June, we have been only averaging around 3.5 to 4 million doses. Okay. The government keeps promising that they are going to ramp up vaccination, but if they don't succeed, the fourth bullet says any downward revisions in vaccination rate would lead to much higher caseloads. However, and the very last point of my talk, as shown by the UK experience, cases might hit 40% of earlier peak, but deaths would be a much lower percentage. So that's all I have to say. Yeah, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, sir, for very, very exciting and wonderful presentation. You started from Spanish flu and then brought the SIR model, then SIRS model, and then our own Sutra model. And in Sutra model also, you have shown that you have taken into consideration for predicting the third wave, even vaccination as well as other parameters also. And in the last, you have shown the riders that vaccinations, you have considered that 5.7 million in the next July, and then 6.4 million, and then going ahead up to 8 million by August. So I hope this is very, very clear message for all the attendees that without any hesitation, one should go and have the vaccination as early as possible. And with this, we are having few questions which
please read them. I will respond to them.
Yeah. So I will be reading one by one, and then you can respond to them. So can you please explain what is exactly data drift in this particular case?
So the data drift happens because you see the parameters of the model, primarily the contact rate, does not remain constant. Because first of all, at any given time, there is always a mixture of mutants. Okay. So that mixture keeps varying. So beta keeps changing. And also, as I mentioned, the level of adherence to the COVID guidelines by people also keeps changing. If you start taking off our masks and running around freely, beta will go up. If you start becoming a little bit more cautious, then beta will go down. So, but instead of trying to predict when beta goes up or goes down, we deduce that on the data itself. And that's where those straight lines that are showed are very important. If that straight line, the data is no longer following the straight line, that means that there is a new phase and we have to adjust the parameter. And that is what we call as the drift.
And sir, in the media, there was a news that we could predict the timing of the peak of the second wave, but we could not exactly predict the numbers. So, how much is the truth behind this?
No, it's very true. That's absolutely correct. What happened was that when if you can just please go back to the predictions for India, if you can actually see the slide number. This is actually slide number 34, and you don't have to go to full screen mode. You can just show it as a slide by itself,
Yeah,
if it's possible, because that will give a clear answer. Yeah, thank you very much. No, that's the last slide. Just keep going back up. It says what caused the second wave. That's the slide. That's the title of the slide. Yeah, that one. Thank you. So you see, what happened is that the basic reproduction ratio increased from 2.3 to 3.8 over a very short period of time. So when we tried to fit our model, we found that the parameters were drifting all the time. They never, if you remember that plot, initially there would be at some drift period and then a straight line, but we never did hit the straight line. So we could keep saying, okay, we're going to hit the peak in the first or latest second week of May, but we don't know the value. And I have to tell you one point. We made this prediction in around the third week or fourth week of April, that the peak will be May 5th to 8th. And that was a very brave thing to do. Nobody else was calling a peak at that point in time, if you cast your mind back. So I made a joke that we have put our neck on the chopping block. And if you don't make a prediction that you are ready to stick to, it's not a prediction. But then we also said that we are more confident about the time of the peak and less confident about the value. But then as April went on and then the drift in the parameters came less and less, we had a lot more confidence in our prediction. So if you just please go to the next slide again. So you see the pale gold curve, which is what we predicted on April 29th, it got the timing of the peak a little bit off, but not much. And it got the value of the peak off, but again, not by much. And we predicted that 10 days ahead of time. Okay. So that's when the drift in the parameters had stopped. So we were very confident of these predictions. And that, by the way, is also why we are not that confident about the UK fourth wave, because those parameters are still drifting.
Yeah. So, thank you, sir. So, we will go to the next question. So, a question is being asked from Sandeep. He is asking, during the second wave, it is moving.
What's the question? During the second wave?
Yeah, 1 second, sir. During the second wave, we saw that the contact tracing and testing was not as aggressive as during the first wave. Does it impact the model?
Not so much, because you see, the reason why we use U is it is for undetected, okay? And people can be undetected for a variety of reasons. First of all, the state government itself becomes very relaxed and casual and not following up the people. That is the lack of contact tracing. Second is people themselves don't know that they're infected. So if you're in the bucket called U, the reason why you're in the bucket called U doesn't really matter. And if you look at the table, again, if I can request you to please go back 2 slides. It says table of parameters from March 2020. So just go up 2 slides. Yeah, that one. You see 1 over epsilon, which is the undetection rate, hasn't changed at all from March 2020 till 29th March of 2021. So now that means that for every 1 tested positive case, there are 27 others who are not detected. And whether they are not detected because they themselves don't know, or because the state government stopped being aggressive about contact tracing, it doesn't affect our model at all.
Yeah. So there is a question from Raju Bapi. He's asking, does the updated Sutra model have provision for possible ineffectiveness of vaccine against a new variant in the future?
Well, yes, but fortunately or unfortunately, even though all the media is wishing for it, it looks like all the vaccines are effective against all the variants thus far.
Yeah. Yeah, and another interesting but very apt question that there is a talk that third wave is going to badly hit the children. So, what is Sutra prediction is telling how children will be affected in the third wave?
Yeah, that is again a bit of hype, you know. There are two serological surveys, one by ICMR and one by All India Institute of Medical Sciences. And both of them are showing that the fraction of children who are serologically positive, that means who have antibodies, is the same as for adults. In the AIMMS study, children have slightly more antibodies. I mean, fraction of children with antibodies is slightly more than for adults. And in the ICMR study, it is slightly less. So the point is, children are already affected in terms of having antibodies. Okay. See, the nature of the pandemic is that children are much more carriers. They don't generally get severely sick. I mean, a few of them get sick, of course, but by and large, they don't. But the big worry is that they'll come home, they give it to their parents, they'll give it to their grandparents, and that is already happening. So in the third wave, if the adults are vaccinated or a lot of them have immunity from having been exposed to the virus before, this factor should not be there. But again, let me say there's a lot of pressure by these vaccine makers to sell vaccines for children. We should be a little bit cautious about giving them vaccines other than, I'm going to put my personal opinion here, the inactivated virus vaccines. Those are the safest for children. Like when we give, polio vaccine for little babies, for example. Those are all inactivated viruses. Some of these newfangled viruses that are there, I think we should be much more cautious about giving them to children, especially when, in my opinion, there is not a pressing danger just yet. Again, media will hype it, but that doesn't mean we have to fall for it.
Yeah. So I think there is a question, sir. By the time I am reading, there are people are adding the questions, so it is difficult for me to hold on one.
No, you asked a question which you think are the most meaningful.
Yeah, yeah. Since COVID-19 seems to punish us for being slack in social distancing measures, and we in general are incorrigible, can we really expect that the pandemic would effectively die after the third wave?
No, pandemic will never die. That was the reason why I put that slide about SIR versus SIRS. The third wave is going to be endemic. It means it will just keep going in a cyclical fashion. Okay. But what will happen is, as all these preventive measures get into place, like the acquired immunity due to having been exposed to the pandemic one, the vaccination, possibly 6 to 8 months or a year from now, a booster shot. So that will keep the vaccination, that will keep the pandemic under check. That will keep the pandemic under check. And I think a day will come, maybe not in 2021, but sometime in 2022, where we can actually say, yeah, we don't really need to bother quite so much about masks and things like that. But I'm not sure we're that incorrigible. In fact, I would say that people are, at least in Hyderabad, when I go out, I see around 50% are masking up. I understand that in Delhi it is 0%.
Yeah. Sir, another interesting question I would like to ask. As per Sutra prediction, third wave is supposed to come by end of the October and in the beginning of the November. By November 28th, it is supposed to be died down. It is roll off will be pretty high. But a few media reports again they are predicting that in fact in Maharashtra an official statement from one of the ministers were there that in another 2 to 3 weeks we are going to have a third wave. So whether any basis is there or simply they are telling without any
Okay,
basis for that?
let me tell you the secret. The person who was quoted as saying Maharashtra will have a third wave in 2 weeks, he is a person called Dr. Shashank Joshi, who is in charge of the Maharashtra COVID analysis. Very fine scientist. He has categorically denied saying that. And I believe him. Okay.
Okay.
But you know how these false quotations go. They take on a life of their own.
True. So I thought that it will be relevant to tell all the audience that they need not worry because of these rumors. But we are having definitely, as per Sutra, we are going to have a third wave. So I think we should be very ready to face that. But yes, the catch is if we are vaccinated and if we are ensuring that our near and dear ones, our colleagues, as well as our neighbors, they are vaccinated, then not only we are safe, but we can say that entire India is going to be safe. I think already we have taken 10 minutes of your extra time, sir.
No, that is
And
fine. I'll just make one small point, if I may.
yes,
I have started using the phrase the third bump instead of the third wave, because I think that if you look at that slide, two of them were really not even waves. They really are third bumps. It was only the very pessimistic scenario, which is not a very high likelihood event, but as forecasters, we have to put it up there. That's the only one that had a genuine third wave. So most likely we'll only have a third bump. That is what I think.
so rightly said. So I will take one last question because he is repeatedly asking, and that is some technical information he's asking. In the graph for US, UK, and India, the y-axis has different coefficient. What are those? And also, okay, this is the question. Yeah. So he's
No, I'll
asking
tell
that
you
in
that.
the graph. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. Whoever asked that question has very good eyes. So let me answer that question. You see, in India, we declare recoveries. Okay. So that means we publish active cases. Now we can go to our Indian website and we can see how many people are active on a given day. But neither the US nor UK gives recoveries. So we cannot predict active cases. We can only predict daily new cases. And see, daily new cases are much more zigzag. That's why the curves are also not very smooth. So yes, whoever said that, I congratulate on your keen eyesight, but you are quite right. We are forced to plot different things for the simple reason that neither US nor UK gives recovery numbers.
So thank you very much, sir. And there is a lot of request for sharing this presentation. So I would like to ask you whether I can share.
Yeah. You can send it, no problem.
Okay.
But you can just send it. It's absolutely not a problem. But also, you know, the website archive, you can look up the Sutra model that has all the mathematical equations if some people have the more inclination to follow. We have not yet put up the third wave predictions on archive, but we will one of these days. But yes,